It's Monday, and that means it's time for a new episode of Interviewing People, the careercast where people can learn about a variety of careers from people actually in those careers. I'm your host, Brian Brott, and today I'll be talking with Tyler Akers, who earned an ROTC scholarship, served as an Army intelligence officer, and is now a demand planning and analysis manager at Groove Life in Nashville, Tennessee. Enjoy the show. Today we have Tyler Akers with us. He's a 2010 graduate of Van Buren, and he currently works at Groove Life in Nashville, Tennessee as a demand planning and analysis manager. Prior to that, he was in the military, in the Army. Part of what led him into the Army was he was part of the ROTC at the University of Toledo, where he attended college. So we're going to get a lot of good information from Tyler today. And Tyler, thank you very much for being with us. And I'd love to just hear you talk a little bit about your Van Buren experience. What were you involved with, so that students can get a better idea of who you were as a high school student?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I've followed a few of your interviews so far, so I'm kind of privileged to be here. Yeah, back to the high school days. Played football, was in show choir. Tried to be as diverse as I could in the activities that I was involved with. Of course, school and academics was a priority as well. Just thinking about post high school and what that might look like. But man, I look back and I truly enjoyed that part of life. And think about the football days and just the camaraderie. It's hard to match that level of camaraderie with the team. I guess I'll roll, junior to senior year. There's obviously lots of questions that students are kind of posed with, where do I go to school? What do I want to do? How am I going to pay for it? Is it the right decision for me? Because it's not, there's lots of opportunities today that doesn't necessarily, equal college that can pay just as well in other areas. And so I started to kind of canvas, what was kind of my priorities, right? So I wanted to kind of imitate that camaraderie within the football team, but I also wanted to go to school on as less debt as I could, right? And so just researching around, I found Army ROTC is kind of that one size fits all for both of those. And so junior year, I believe it was, I went down to Ohio University, where I had applied for this scholarship, and they make you do a test, right? So you come in and it's proposed with a multiple level of leadership interviews with some of the folks who were seniors in that program at Ohio University. Then of course the Army is a physical job, and so there was a physical element. There was a PT test, as we call it, 2-mile runs, 2 minutes of push-ups, and 2 minutes of sit-ups. And so as candidates across the country are participating in this process, you kind of get shaken out on an order of merit list, right? And okay. The Army would review on a cyclical yearly basis those applicants, and throughout that next year would start issuing scholarships from the top down of, hey, these are the guys and gals that we think are, 100% we want, right? And then 90% we like these guys too. So they would issue 4-year scholarships to those cadets, believing that they'll be future leaders of the Army and they'll do great things for the country.
That's interesting. I never knew that you went down to Ohio U and did all of that. So yep. Is that the one place in Ohio where ROTC candidates went, or could they go to various places?
Yeah, you could do it at any college that has an ROTC program. At the time, I was looking to go to OU.
Oh, okay.
So we did a campus visit basically, and then we did the ROTC portion of that while I was down there. So.
Okay, that's interesting. So what led you to Toledo from OU?
Yeah, so what the ROTC scholarship, I'll give a little kind of some backbone to what it is and what it equates to. For me, I was a 4-year scholarship winner, which means, hey, freshman through senior year, your tuition is completely paid for. I was given a monthly stipend, which is a tax-free, basically, paycheck. As a freshman, it's like $300 a month, and as a senior, it was up to $500 a month. A book stipend, which was about $600 a semester, and then a housing stipend, which was around $2,500 a semester.
Oh, wow.
And so it's an extremely great opportunity financially to go to school, you know, we'll call it for free, but yeah, there's obviously an obligation to the service post graduation. And so when it came down to it, I had just met my then girlfriend, who's my now wife of almost 10 years, and decided that Toledo was our best option to stay close and stay remote. That was probably the first factor into that decision, but also they were paying a little more. Like the school has a little bit of they've got a little discernment they can do with the housing stipend, and Toledo was offering like $500 more a semester for it. So
Okay.
between those two, it kind of made me go to Toledo. And at the time, I was looking to major in criminal justice, as you know, my dad was in law enforcement, and I just loved what he did. And Toledo also had a full-on criminal justice program, whereas I think OU had like a sociology-based criminal justice program. So that was probably the last factor.
So what did it look like to be in college and be in ROTC? Was this something that impacted you every day, or was it once a week, once a month? What did that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of a lifestyle. It's almost like being a college athlete. You've got obligations outside of the classroom that take you away from, you know, normal college life, that you would call it. My personal experience, we had to, you know, we had PT, which is physical training. I'll refer to it as PT moving forward. But PT would be 3 to 5 days a week, depending on kind of what group you're in. Starting out, you would exercise from probably 6 to 7:30 Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And then you kind of shower and you go to class and you do your normal classwork. And then depending on what level you are, as a freshman, you really just kind of participate. And so there's a leadership lab as well, and then also a classroom portion as well. And you just really start to learn the basic fundamentals of the Army in those environments. As you progress and as you become a sophomore, as a junior, you start to take on leadership levels within the ROTC program. So obviously there's a leadership element there. As I'm now a sophomore, you know, a squad leader, as we would call it, looking after and feeding information to all of the freshmen that might be kind of under my leadership command, if you will. So certainly as you progress, the level of complexity grows, the level of responsibility grows. You know, as a junior and senior, you are learning to run missions and to run operations both in the field and in garrison, which is just kind of your office term for running in, or, you know, being in the Army. And so, yeah, it's kind of what it normally looked like. Certainly I had some college friends that would look at you and be like, you guys are nuts, you know? You see, you know, because we would run around campus at 6 a.m. and we'd be doing, you know, chants and some cadence calls and waking all the students up sleeping in the dorms, right? And so we always got looked at like we were crazy, but it was for a good cause. So
Yeah. So did any of that require you going off campus? Did you travel any as a result of ROTC while you were in college?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did. Most we'll call it leadership labs were kind of on a Thursday between 3 to 5 p.m. And it was generally planned to be within the campus. But there was always a field training exercise, or an FTX, that was once every semester we would do off campus. And it was about a Thursday through Sunday. And it was relatively long days and short nights, going to, you know, we'd go to Camp Perry, or we would go to Indiana, or we'd, you know, Camp Custard up in Michigan, mostly National Guard based sites, where we would spend time in a legitimate barracks. We would do time in the field and do land navigation out on, you know, legitimate Army courses. And so certainly traveled like that. And then there was opportunity based on how you were performing as a cadet to do Army schools. And so the Army, you know, allots so many slots to go to airborne school, we'll call it, which is your jump school, or air assault, which is a helicopter-based program And so cadets, depending on, how well they're performing, had opportunities as a junior and senior to go to those schools that are sanctioned by the real Army. There was also had a couple friends that would do cultural immersion training. And so for 30 or 60 days, they would go to Uganda, and they would train with the Ugandan officers, or North Africa, or, just kind of all places all over the globe, which is pretty cool to see those guys go do that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So how many people hypothetically are in the ROTC program at a place like Toledo at a given time? Is it 100 people? Is it 300? Is it 50?
Yeah, it's I'd say it flows between 80 to 120 on average.
Okay.
There are, I'll clear up one misconception too. So as a scholarship cadet, I have the obligation to obviously be there and participate, right? But as a normal college student, we often had, freshmen come in who would just take the leadership lab just to see if they liked it. It still counts as credits. It still counted towards undergraduate programs. And so there was always 10 or 15% of our population that just kind of cycled in and out, just kind of tasting it. And, a lot of them fizzled out, but, we also found a lot of good leaders through that as well,
right.
Who stuck for around long enough that they got a scholarship as a sophomore, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it would vary between about that. A relatively tight community, led by mostly active duty officers and listed senior NCOs, and then some of it, retired guys or contractors would lead it, above the cadet level.
That's really interesting that someone who didn't intend to go into ROTC when they went to college, that person could end up joining and again getting that scholarship, which I was not aware of that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I even had friends that came in with me as a 4-year scholarship recipient that said, this isn't for me. And they walked away from the program, and they just didn't like it. It wasn't for them. And, that's okay, because that frees up a scholarship for somebody who really does want to be there.
Right. Right.
And so I was super fortunate and super blessed to go to college with a 4-year scholarship. I had a lot of friends that came into the program who, just from sticking around long enough and competing and, performing, that ended up getting a 3-year scholarship or even a 2-year scholarship. So I would, encourage folks, if they apply for the scholarship, they don't make the process, to stick with it, because there's always opportunity for those who are working hard for it.
Good, good. So, looking back now at not having any student debt after college, how do you feel like that's impacted your life?
It's been a huge blessing, huge blessing. I was relatively, concerned about that as a junior. I can't remember what started it, but I started listening to Dave Ramsey, his podcast. And Dave Ramsey, for those who might know him, is, he's got this financial peace program, which is based around being debt free, and what are their options besides going into debt for things like college and cars. And so I just had this kind of seed in my mind that said, hey, if you don't get this scholarship, what are your alternate ways to do that, right? So I didn't know that I had got my scholarship till I think about halfway through my senior year. And so that first semester back in high school, I was evaluating, hey, what's the National Guard have to offer? What does Owens have to offer? Some way to bridge what I still want to achieve professionally, but doing it the most way that is, financially feasible.
Right.
And I had friends in college that are still paying off their student loans, that are, pay more than they do for their cars for student loans. And I don't know how they do it, because I've got, a small amount of debt in a car, and it's like, that weighs on me. I can imagine that with multiple loans. Right.
Right.
So yeah, as much as I could encourage students to look at their alternate paths, you have to pay what you sign up for. And at some point or another, that catches up, right?
As you finished college and transitioned into the Army, what did that look like as a result of your ROTC experience? What doors did that open as you went into the Army, so forth?
We'll talk about kind of the junior to senior year experience in ROTC. So your junior year is really the year that you're being, you kind of have a report card. And then as you complete your junior year and going into your senior year, that summer break, there is a 30 to 40 day graded training experience. For me, it was in Seattle, Washington, where we went to the base out there, JBLM, and we competed with cadets across the nation. And so you're given a date that you report, and you get integrated with cadets from Clemson to Florida State to Auburn to just, every country or every campus across the state, across the country. And so you can do this big integration, and then you are graded depending on, how well you perform in leadership and how well you perform exercises. And obviously you go through that test, and you kind of go back home and you start your senior year where you are more of a management level within the cadet program. But what that training and that exercise does is it puts you on an order of merit list. Within the ROTC program, you kind of have these two paths. One is to go on active duty as an officer, or to go into the reserves as an officer, but both time commitments are different. So for active duty, it's 4 years. If you go into the reserves, it's 8. So there's different pathways. And then of course, those are competitive. Active duty was a competitive component to get into when I was in school. And depending on how well you performed, I had friends who wanted to be on active duty, but they got slotted to go to the reserves because they didn't rank high enough on the order of merit list. And so that's an extremely important part to the program, right? And as you get selected for active duty, you also have your chance to select, you kind of create this wish list of, hey, what do I want to do in the Army, and where do I want to go? Mm-hmm. And so between the branches of, your combat arms guys, of armor, your infantry, to kind of the combat support branches like I was an intelligence officer, but there's signal, which is kind of your IT teams, a variety of quartermaster, which is a logistics kind of role. But there's so many levels of layers into the Army that you can kind of pick from. So the combination of that training going into your senior year really dictates what happens post college, right? And so just my pathway, I had done fairly well in it. I was a top 20% cadet, so I had got my first branch choice as military intelligence, and then I got like my 4th duty station, which is a very much less important thing to the Army. They just kind of fit you where you need to go, where the needs of the Army are. So you have a less chance of getting that more than you do your branch choice. But we got stationed at Fort Benning, and so rolling into my senior year, spring semester, when I'm getting ready to graduate and move on, I had received my orders. My orders told me, hey, where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and when you're going to do it. So I think I commissioned on a Friday, which means we officially take our oath. We get pinned with our second lieutenant bars, which means, yeah, you've made it. You're a second lieutenant in the Army, which is such a special moment.
Right.
And then literally the next day, we graduated our college ceremony, and so kind of this bang bang. You graduate, you commission, so you now have your bachelor's degree, and you also have your gold bars, your second lieutenant bars as an officer. So
obviously you probably can't tell us a lot about being in military intelligence, but anything you can share with us? I mean, is it what we see on TV when it comes to intelligence and so forth, or
Sure.
Is it completely different from that?
It just is so dependent on where you go and what that unit is doing, right? I started my career at Fort Benning. Well, I really started it. You come on active duty. There's a basic course, they call it, for officers. So I was at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, which is about an hour south of Tucson, close to the Mexico border, for 4 months, just doing initial kind of training on what's it like to be an intel officer. I know what it's like to be in leadership positions, based on the last 4 years, but rolling into, hey, this is kind of your specialty, or what they call is your MOS. And it's just setting basic fundamentals of, hey, what's it mean to be an intel officer in a tactical or a combat arms unit, and what type of work do they do? And the most basic level is, hey, think like the enemy does, and what are they going to do based on where we're at and what our mission is, right? And so it's a lot of just kind of mapping and and they called it IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. And so it's just mapping out, if I was wearing the foreign or the enemy commander's hat, what would I do strategically with the elements that I have? Or, you know, if it's a tank company, they're going to maneuver like this. And so it's just thinking, thinking in like what the enemy would do. From there, I went to Fort Benning. I spent my actual unit time there. So I actually landed in a tank battalion. We had Broadleys and Abrams tanks in our unit, and I was in the intelligence cell of that battalion. And so really, there's a ton of opportunity within the intelligence world. I had some really unique experiences, kind of aligned to our mission. So we were under a North American command, and so we were doing some gathering of foreign cartels doing illegal things. But I had some experiences also in DC where I had got the opportunity to go to the NSA headquarters, the National Reconnaissance Organization headquarters, the DIA headquarters. And so all that's really cool when you're brand new to the intelligence community, because that is that is the nuts and bolts of our country, right? Those are the folks who are watching all the bad guys across the globe. And so just being able to experience those types of and learn was extremely fun. I enjoyed the heck out of it. Even doing a biometrics course, which is it's another level of intelligence that the U.S. has kind of grown into, which just says, hey, every person has unique features about them, right? And so when a special operations group would land on an objective, they would, you know, capture all the folks that are on it, and they would roll their fingers, grab their fingerprints, and they would do iris scans, and they would collect that data and put it in the big bank. And, you know, ISIS shows up, you know, mid 2014, 2015, and by golly, we're rolling on objectives with guys we had, you know, rolled up on 6-7 years ago. And so it's just piecing all that together. It was pretty cool to see on a much a bigger macro level.
Yeah. That's interesting. So when you were in the in the Army, active duty, you went back and you did some additional schoolwork. You went to Liberty University, earned a master's degree in business administration. How did you choose Liberty? And I guess, why did you go get that master's in business administration as you looked ahead to life after the military?
Yeah. When I started in college, I started as a criminal justice undergrad, thinking I wanted to do something in federal law enforcement. And so I kind of took that and said, hey, experience as an intel officer with a top secret security clearance with the government, that could be my best layup into landing a federal job. Of course, as life evolves and as you get married and have children, sometimes plans they change and your priorities change. And for me, the idea of that kind of switched to, hey, what makes the most sense for my family? And so I did choose to go to Liberty University. As soon as I got down to Fort Benning, we kind of, my wife and I were thinking about it and like, hey, what makes the most sense? And there's so many parallels from managing in the Army to managing in the business world. So I started to kind of see how those made sense, and then really said, hey, let's go after business. My father-in-law was in business. It was super intriguing. It's a lot of the fundamentals of leadership and cross-functional building groups of teams that conquer, problems and objectives. It all parallels itself. And so I chose Liberty. Really, it was another tuition decision. They were giving all active duty military members half off of their online tuition cost. Wow. And then I was able to, based on my service time, get the Army to pay for about another third of that, which is another important point, just kind of thinking about ROTC. And, the Army paid for my master's entirely, or my undergrad entirely, but they also paid for about a third of my master's. And so, yeah, it was a full online course. Lots of, there's pros and cons to that. Going from an on-campus experience to a digital experience, it's not as easy as folks think, but it's also, it's easier in some ways too with schedules and stuff like that. So being full-time active duty, with my wife working full-time nights as a nurse and 2 kids, it just made the most sense to to do it online.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Yeah, as you get older, you have so many more levels of things you need to consider when you are making those career decisions
Right.
and
Yeah.
so forth. So
that's absolutely right.
so eventually you ended up at Asurion. I'd love to hear what you did there, and then how did that lead you into your current position at Groove Life?
As a coming up on my 4th year of service in the Army, that was my obviously my obligation, commitment to them. But you submit a packet that says, hey, I'm going to request to get out, and that has to flow through and get approved, and you get basically a date that says, hey, this is your official out date. And so just looking at that and kind of do some backwards planning, I heard about a group called Cameron Brooks, and Cameron Brooks is a junior military officer headhunter, if you will, and they look for officers leaving the service across all branches and say, hey, these guys and gals have a unique set of skills and experiences that offer a lot to corporate America. And so they are a great resource for folks leaving the service. And what their role was, so they basically just kind of say, hey, here's the Army, Tyler. And here's what business Tyler would look like. And they just kind of bridge that gap and say, hey, these are the things you've done, and this is how that translates to business roles. And, what you did in the Army as a project manager directly relates to what being a project manager in business looks like. And so I went through their program. I went to what they call their career conference and interviewed with 14 companies in 2 days. I had received some offers out of it, and it was a really great transition piece to leaving the service. I ended up not taking a role with them as the location's limited, and we were really specific in trying to find a spot here in Tennessee. We had family here. And so ended up not taking a job with them, but taking all of that experience and applying it to personally going out and seeking after jobs. And so the traditional way of just applying, sending your resume is really, really tough today. And it's all about networking and knowing folks. But I was one of those lucky guys that got through and had a great interview experience at Asurion that led to a great starting role post-service. So, yeah.
I like that you brought up relationships, because that's something we've really been talking about and thinking about how we can build relationships with people, not just to get something out of them, but to, hopefully help them in the future or help other people in the future. I guess talk a little bit about, are there any relationships that played a big role in you ending up where you are today, or any that helped you while you were in the military, so forth?
Yeah, certainly. It's difficult to move to a city that you don't know a whole lot of people in, right? And that was our experience coming to Nashville. We didn't know a whole lot of folks. And so for me to land that job at Asurion and start there was just a super huge blessing for us. And, of course, as I started in Asurion and looking back at the Army, certainly, like you said, Mr. Brott, building relationships is such a key element to careers and growth, and, not just looking at people as an opportunity for yourself, but like you said, I've had several folks reach out to me and say, hey, we were in a unit 3 years ago and see you're in Nashville and looking to get out. What kind of advice and tips can you give me? And, that's all. I think it's just kind of well known at this kind of stage in my career that everybody, is out for just trying to grow those networks and know that it's super beneficial kind of down the road when things change or you change companies. Or in my case, I was laid off at Asurion after being there for a year and a half. And so I had a church body that I ended up finding this job through, which was I look at my career and it's like, hey, that one job I got at Asurion doesn't look anything like how I got the one here, right? Outside of interview skills, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, they're vastly important to growing yourself as a leader, growing yourself. When you kind of spread out and you learn and grow and meet new people, you take in a lot of the good and the bad. And hopefully, as a leader and as a person who's looking to progress in their career, you're taking all that good and making it your own. So
another thing we've talked about quite a bit in class is personal branding, and how I've encouraged students take control of your future. don't be afraid to go out and build those relationships, but also show people what you can do, what your interests are, so forth. Is that ever anything that you think about today, or is it ever anything you've thought about in the past that might have contributed to what you were able to accomplish in the military, what you've accomplished in your professional life, so forth?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and part of that personal branding is how do I exploit my strengths to, achieve the things I want to achieve. For me, my relationship building and communication, I think, have been strong suits for me personally. And so walking into interviews and walking into new organizations and saying, hey, this is what I know I'm pretty good at, and leveraging those and saying, try to make that, or articulate that to those across the aisle, was important to me, and really how I got my first job at Asurion. I was a supplier manager. My boss said, hey, the technical side of our job, you have like no experience in, but the elements I can't teach, the soft skills, if you will, you do have, and that's hard to find. What you have is hard to find. And so, managing several suppliers in Canada around the Toronto market, remotely, living down here in Nashville is there's an element of difficulty to that requires somebody who's really good at building relationships and really good at communicating. And so, but the Excel side, the SKU stuff, the in-house product, I didn't deal with any of that in the Army,
Right.
but I can teach you that,
Right.
And so just leveraging your strengths and knowing what those are, but also knowing your weaknesses and working to correct those, right?
Yep.
And so for me, the job skills of working in Excel and understanding how formulas work, like I've grown immensely over the last few years since I've been in business, to where in the Army it was super, super duper simple.
Well, and I think what you just said there just reinforces the learning never stops. We
That's
always
absolutely
have
right.
more we can learn. We just have to be willing to take those risks and try something that's new and
Yeah.
see where it takes us.
Yeah, you're right. Navigating change is difficult. The Army was super good at creating change in my life between new leaders and new soldiers and new jobs and new positions. And, I just start to learn how to adapt to change. And that doesn't ever stop. I walked into the office that day at Asurion not knowing I was going to go home without a job that day, and 3 kids to feed. So just being able to adapt and overcome in, the situations that you're put in is super important. And, for my family and I, it's always been a faith-based walk. We walked in faith to get to Nashville. We've walked in faith to get to this job at Groove Life. And, the Lord's blessed us in many different ways.
So you are a demand planning and analysis manager. I can't say I've ever heard that job title before. What do you do? Is that are you the only one of those at Groove Life? Are there multiple people that do that?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that position.
Yeah. So just kind of going from Asurion to Groove Life at Asurion, at Asurion, I was a supplier manager, a company of 17,000 people globally, and doing a lot of business across the world, and coming to Groove Life, where we have 160 employees, and we're based in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Very different scales, but job skills certainly translated. And at Asurion, I was working in Excel a lot, working with SKUs and providing product to suppliers to refurbish and send back to us. That was a part of our demand for customers. And so taking that experience and rolling it into Groove Life, I am one of two, the second of the two. The first guy was here before me, and Garrett Scott, who's been a great mentor for me. But we look at our product categories. So at Groove Life, we sell silicone rings, silicone watch bands, and now we have a Groove belt, we call it. And those 3 products have done tremendously well over the last 3 years. So as you think about a need for a product, it ebbs and flows throughout the year and throughout the sector of business that you sell it in. And we do our best to navigate that and forecast to what that need is going to be month over month. We want to have just the right amount here, just the right amount product built for just the right amount of customers who want it. And so it's a super detailed analytical role that we take a look at previous sales, and some of it is what we call just a wet finger. Like, we truly don't know. Like, it's hey, I don't know, man. Let's just use our best set of knowledge that we know to draft a plan for it. And it's a lot of fun, quite honestly.
Good.
Working here at a smaller company, you have the level of impact that I have and the level of influence is far more than it was at Asurian at a much larger company. And so, yeah, I mean, we do the whole, we go from what's our sales going to be in 2021 to how many size 7 edge rings in black am I going to need for tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And it is just the management of kind of the full view of warehouse and inventory, and making sure we have enough of it and the right amount. In business, if you order too much of the wrong product, that eats into your net income, right? Like if you made, we'll call it $10,000 in the whole year, and you've got 2,000 of excess inventory, you've only made 8,000, right? So it's a super delicate balance to having just the right amount and just the right time.
So the very last question I have that I ask every guest to wrap up is, what is something you know now about life after high school and careers that you wish someone had told you while you were in high school?
For me, Mr. Barat, like I was in your shoes 10 years ago. I have no idea what is out there. I have no idea what type of role I could be doing and what company I could be working for, right? For me, I think the breadth and depth of exposure as a high school senior was minimal. I didn't know about all these opportunities where, I've seen my dad, I've seen a couple of friends' dads, I kind of know what some of them do, and that was kind of the scope of what I knew was out there for work. And so I would just say, hey, go talk to as many people as you can, do as much research as you can. The internet's a great tool for exploring those jobs and exploring those roles. And, at the end of the day, there are fundamental pieces to what I do that I could take almost anywhere. Team leadership ability, cross-functional environment, working with different teams and such like that, and solving problems. Like those are the basic things I like to do. Mm-hmm. And I can do those in a lot of different capacities. And so, finding out kind of what makes you tick, and then moving forward with jobs that can help, exploit that product. So if you would ask me 10 years ago, hey, Tyler, did you know you're going to be married with 4 children, working at a silicone ring company in Spring Hill, Tennessee, I would have said you're crazy, But that's where life sometimes leads you. And so just being able to be versatile, know that the market is always changing, and to know that there's a ton of opportunity, there's a ton of cool stuff out there, job-wise, there's a ton of cool companies doing interesting things. And if you can hang on to a few things that they're doing that you like, then you might have a good chance.
Very good. Well, I think that is some very good advice, and I really appreciate your service to our country and protecting our freedom, and glad to see how well things are going for you and your family, and both professionally and personally. So I would just want to thank you very much for sharing all of this with students, and there may even be some adults that need to hear some of what you said today to encourage them in their career path. Thank you very much, and I hope everything continues to go well for you in Tennessee.
Well, thank you so much. I would just ask if there's any questions that people can reach out to me directly, tyler.akers@groovelife.com. I'll take any questions, or if you have students that want to learn more about ROTC, or hey, I heard you talk about this, what did that really mean? I'm obviously open to that. And find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you for visiting the Interviewing People CareerCast. And to be sure you don't miss additional career information, please click subscribe so you'll know when the next episode is released. Thank you for watching. And as always, remember the best part about Mondays is interviewing people.